3 days after my brother-in-law moved his entire life into our house, I finally understood what my dad meant when he told me, years ago, that some people will take everything you offer and then complain the plate wasn't warm enough. I should have listened. My name doesn't matter as much as what happened, but for context, I'm 34. I work as a registered nurse at a hospital in Mississauga, and until about 8 months ago, I had what I genuinely believed was a good marriage. My husband and I had been together for 6 years, married for 3. We owned a semi-detached on a quiet street, nothing fancy but ours. We had a routine. We had a savings plan. We were talking about starting a family, then his brother lost his job. I want to be fair here because I've gone over this so many times in my head. My brother-in-law, I'll call him my brother-in-law throughout because that's all he ever was to me. Not a friend, not family in any real sense. He'd been working in logistics in Hamilton, and when the company downsized, he was let go. That part I understood. That happens. I didn't even hesitate when my husband asked if he could stay with us for a bit while he got back on his feet. Of course, I said. Family helps family. I meant it. What I didn't know, what nobody bothered to tell me, was that a bit meant something very different to my husband's family than it did to me, and that my brother-in-law wouldn't be coming alone. He showed up on a Saturday afternoon in October with 2 large duffel bags, a gaming setup in 3 separate boxes, and his mother. My mother-in-law stood in my front hallway with her coat still on, looked around the living room I had spent the better part of a Saturday morning cleaning, and said, "It's smaller than I expected." That was her hello. My husband kissed her on the cheek and carried her bag to the guest room. Our only guest room, which meant my brother-in-law would be on the pullout in the basement. I made tea. I smiled. I told myself this was temporary. My mother-in-law had come to help her son settle in, which apparently meant she would also be staying. Nobody asked me. My husband mentioned it almost as an afterthought while I was making dinner that night, standing with his back to me, refilling his glass of water. "She's going to stay for a few weeks," he said. "Just to help him get comfortable." "Get comfortable," I repeated. "You know how she is. She worries." I did know how she was. That was exactly the problem. The first week I told myself it was just an adjustment period. Everyone was figuring out the new rhythm of the house. My mother-in-law liked to rearrange things. She moved my spice rack, reorganized my pantry, shifted the furniture in the living room 2 feet to the left because she said it opened up the space. I came home from a 12-hour shift Tuesday night and didn't recognize my own kitchen for a full 30 seconds. My brother-in-law, meanwhile, had settled into the basement like he'd always lived there. He slept until noon. He played video games until 2 in the morning. I could hear it through the floor. He left dishes in the sink. He ate whatever was in the fridge without asking, including the lunches I meal prepped on Sundays for the week ahead, which meant I was buying food at the hospital cafeteria and spending money I hadn't budgeted for. I brought it up with my husband on a Friday evening. Gently, I thought. Can we maybe set some house rules? Just basic stuff, dishes, noise after 10, not eating food that's labeled. He looked at me like I'd suggested something unreasonable. "He's going through a hard time," he said. "Cut him some slack. I'm not trying to be harsh. He just needs a few more weeks to decompress," he stressed. Decompress. He'd been unemployed for 6 weeks. He had not sent out a single resume that I was aware of. He had, however, purchased a new headset with my husband's credit card, which I only found out about when the statement came in, and I asked about the charge from a gaming accessories website. I said he could, my husband told me. He needed it for his setup. I didn't say anything. I should have said something. But I was so tired, and it felt like every conversation about his family ended with me being the one who was cold, who was difficult, who didn't understand what it meant to support the people you love. I grew up differently. My parents were warm but firm. We helped each other, genuinely. But there was always a line between helping and enabling. My dad used to say that you can hold someone's hand to help them walk, but you can't carry them forever because eventually your back gives out and then you're both on the ground. I didn't understand at the time how much that phrase would apply to my marriage. By November, my mother-in-law had stopped pretending she was a guest. She had a preferred spot on the couch. She had opinions about when the thermostat should be set, and how loud the TV could be in the evenings, and what I should be cooking for dinner. One night I made roasted salmon with lemon and dill and a wild rice pilaf, a meal I'd made a dozen times, something my husband had always said he loved, and she pushed the fish around her plate and said, loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I don't understand why she always has to be so complicated about food. A simple chicken would do." My husband said nothing. I excused myself to clean up the kitchen, which I did slowly and very thoroughly because I needed something to do with my hands. The financial piece had been quietly expanding in ways I hadn't fully added up yet. My mother-in-law wasn't working. My brother-in-law wasn't working. My husband was working, but his take-home after his union dues and benefits deductions was significantly less than mine. He worked in municipal transit maintenance, which was stable but not high-earning. Our mortgage, our utilities, our groceries, the car insurance on a car only my husband and I used. All of that came out of our joint account, which was funded disproportionately by my paychecks. What I hadn't anticipated was that having 2 additional adults in the house would cost what it cost. Our grocery bill nearly doubled. The heating bill in November was almost twice what it had been the year before. My brother-in-law's gaming equipment drew power like a small appliance factory. None of this was acknowledged. None of it was offered to be offset. I brought up the household costs to my husband in December, with a spreadsheet. Because I'm that kind of person, I track things, it's a coping mechanism, and showed him that we were running about $1,400 over our normal monthly expenses since October. He looked at the spreadsheet for a long time. "You made a spreadsheet," he said. "I like to see the numbers clearly. This is about my family. This is about our finances," I said. "I'm not asking your mom to pay rent. I'm asking if your brother can contribute something. Groceries, utilities, anything." My husband closed my laptop. "He doesn't have income right now. You know that, I know. I'm the one paying for everyone while he figures it out." It was the most direct I'd been. I watched something shift in my husband's face. Not guilt, not understanding, something closer to resentment. Like I had broken an unspoken agreement by naming the thing we weren't supposed to name. That conversation didn't go anywhere, but it didn't end there either. In January, I found out that my brother-in-law's son, he had a 14-year-old from a previous relationship, was enrolled in a private school in Burlington. The tuition was $18,000 a year. My husband had been contributing to it for 2 years, without telling me. I found out because a letter came in the mail, addressed to my husband, from the school's billing office, and I opened it thinking it might be something important. It was a notice that the upcoming semester payment was due, $9,000. Due in 3 weeks. I sat at the kitchen table with that letter for a long time. When my husband came home that evening, I had the letter on the table between us. He saw it the moment he walked into the kitchen. He knew immediately what it was. "I was going to tell you," he said. When the time was right. The time was right before you spent $9,000 of our money on a school I didn't know existed." He said his brother had asked him for help when his son was transitioning schools, that the private school had better programs for kids with learning differences, that my brother-in-law couldn't afford it on his own, that family stepped up. He said it was the right thing to do. "And now," I asked, "now that he's living in our basement and not working, we keep helping. That's what you do." I looked at my husband across our kitchen table, the table we'd picked out together at a shop in Oakville, carried up the front steps ourselves because we didn't want to wait for delivery, ate 100 ordinary dinners at, and I felt something shift that I couldn't shift back. I asked him directly, how long had he planned to keep paying? Was there a limit? Was there a conversation we were ever going to have where I was included? He told me I didn't understand his family dynamics. I told him I understood them perfectly. We didn't speak much that night, or the night after. My mother-in-law, who had the hearing of someone 20 years younger, had apparently caught enough of our conversations to form a position. She pulled my husband aside the following weekend. I heard it from the hallway, they weren't quiet, and told him that I had always been difficult, that I held money over people's heads, that she had known from the beginning I was the kind of woman who kept score. I'm the kind of woman who kept score. I thought about the 12-hour shifts, the $1,400 monthly overage, the $9,000 letter, the salmon I'd made that wasn't simple enough. I thought about my dad's voice. Eventually your back gives out, and then you're both on the ground. My mother called me that Sunday afternoon, the way she does every Sunday, and I sat in my car in our own driveway to take the call because I didn't want an audience. She asked how things were going, that specific way mothers ask when they already know the answer isn't good. I told her everything. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Come for dinner this week, bring your paperwork." She didn't mean recipes. I want to tell you about my parents because they matter to this story. My dad retired early from a career in civil engineering, and my mother ran a small accounting practice out of their home in Brampton for 20 years. They are practical people. They are also the two people who have consistently been in my corner without requiring me to justify why I deserve to be stood up for. My dad met me at the door that Wednesday evening and just looked at me for a second and said, "You look tired." "I am tired. Come eat first, then we talk." My mother had made a pot of split pea soup and fresh bread, the kind of meal that says you are loved without making a production of it. We ate and I filled them in on everything, the full picture, numbers included. My dad listened without interrupting, which he almost never does, which meant he was taking it seriously. When I finished, he said, "What does your husband say when you tell him this is affecting your marriage?" I realized I hadn't framed it that way. I'd talked about money, about fairness, about logistics. I hadn't said out loud to my husband's face, "This is hurting us." "I don't think he sees the connection," I said. My dad looked at my mother. Something passed between them. "Do you want to save the marriage?" he asked carefully. "Or do you want to fix the immediate situation?" It was the right question. It was also the question I wasn't ready to answer yet. I drove home that night with a clearer head than I'd had in months. I decided I was going to have one real conversation with my husband, not about money, not about logistics, but about us. About what I needed, about what I felt was happening to the foundation of something we'd built together. I asked him, that Thursday evening, to sit with me after dinner, just us. I waited until my mother-in-law had gone upstairs, and my brother-in-law had disappeared to the basement. I told him I loved him. I told him I had been feeling invisible in my own home. I told him that watching him defend his family's comfort at the expense of our partnership was something I couldn't keep absorbing. I told him I wasn't asking him to cut his family off. I would never ask that. I was asking him to see me as an equal voice in our household. He listened, he actually listened, and I felt a small spark of hope. Then he said, "Maybe this just isn't the right fit for you. Maybe you need something different." I asked him what he meant. "I've been thinking," he said slowly, "that maybe we want different things. And maybe we should consider whether getting an annulment is the right move." I remember the exact sound of the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. I remember the streetlight coming through the window. I remember my own hands in my lap, very still. He had just suggested ending our marriage. Because I had told him I felt invisible, I took a breath. And then I made the clearest decision of my life. "Okay," I said. He blinked. "What? If that's what you want, okay. I agree." He had expected me to argue. To cry, beg for another chance, another conversation, another round of absorbing everything quietly. I could see how unprepared he was for my answer. I got up, went to the bedroom, and called my mother. The following Monday, I sat in the office of a family lawyer in downtown Mississauga, a woman my mother had recommended, sharp and methodical, and the kind of person who makes you feel like the paperwork is already handled before you've even signed anything. I brought everything. The spreadsheet, the bank statements going back 2 years, the school billing letter, a log I'd been keeping on my phone of the household expense increases month over month. She looked through it all and said, "You've done my job for me." She explained my options clearly. Under Ontario family law, the matrimonial home and assets accumulated during the marriage would be subject to equalization. The contributions I had made, financial, documented, mattered. The $18,000 in private school tuition my husband had paid toward his nephew's education from our joint funds without my consent was relevant. She also told me something I hadn't known, that I was under no legal obligation to continue covering any expenses for my in-laws from the moment I filed. I filed that week. When my husband received the papers, he called me 6 times in one afternoon. I let 4 of them go to voicemail. On the 5th, I answered. "You didn't have to do this," he said. "You asked for an annulment," I said. I agreed. "I didn't think you'd actually." "I know," I said. "I know you didn't." He asked if we could talk. I told him we could talk through our lawyers. The first thing I did after filing was remove myself from the joint account and open a separate one. The second thing I did was contact the private school in Burlington and inform them, in writing, that I was no longer affiliated with the payment arrangement and that the upcoming semester balance was not something I would be covering, $9,000. I watched that obligation leave my life like setting down something I hadn't realized was breaking my back. My brother-in-law called me 2 days later, furious. He said I was punishing an innocent child. I told him, as calmly as I could, that his son was not my financial responsibility, his son's father was. I told him that if he was worried about tuition, he might consider finding employment. He hung up. My mother-in-law left the house 4 days after I filed. She didn't say goodbye to me directly, just moved through the rooms gathering her things while I was in the kitchen making coffee. Before she left, she stopped in the doorway and said, "I hope you're happy with yourself." I thought about that for a second. "I'm getting there," I said. My brother-in-law held out another 3 weeks, because he had nowhere else to go. During that time, my husband and I lived in the same house the way people do when a decision has been made, but the logistics are still being sorted, politely, carefully, without touching anything important. My husband slept in the guest room. I kept my routines. I worked my shifts. I made dinner for myself and left enough for whoever wanted it. And sometimes my husband ate it, and once or twice he thanked me for it. And it was so strange how normal it felt, and how irreparably something had ended. The mediation appointment was set for late March. My lawyer had advised me on what to expect. The process in Ontario is different from what you see in American courtroom dramas. And nothing about it was theatrical. It was two people in a room with their respective lawyers, going through documents, being civil out of necessity. My husband's mother was not in that room. My brother-in-law was not in that room. This was between my husband and me, the way it should have been from the beginning. What came out of mediation, documented and signed, an equalization of matrimonial assets, a formal acknowledgement of the joint funds spent on private school tuition without my consent as a debt owed to me, and a clean separation of our finances and the property. He kept the car. I kept the house, with a buyout arrangement spread over 18 months that my lawyer had structured to protect me. The total amount I was reimbursed for undisclosed joint expenditures, the tuition payments, plus the excess household costs I had documented, came to just over $31,000. I'm not going to pretend that number made everything okay. It didn't. Losing a marriage doesn't balance out regardless of what the paperwork says. But I'm also not going to pretend I wasn't sitting in my car in the parking garage after that mediation, with the signed documents in my bag and feeling something very close to peace. My dad picked up on the second ring when I called him. "How did it go?" he asked. "It's done," I said. I heard him exhale, long and slow, the way he does when he's been holding something. "Good," he said. "Come for dinner Sunday. It's been 5 months now. My brother-in-law got a job in warehousing in Brampton. I know this because my husband told me at the one coffee we had, a few weeks after everything was finalized, to exchange the last of the small things that still needed exchanging." He looked tired. He also looked like someone who had been doing a lot of thinking. He apologized, not comprehensively, not in a way that resolved anything, but genuinely. I believed it was genuine. He said he hadn't understood what he was asking me to absorb, that, by the time he saw it clearly, he'd already said the thing that couldn't be unsaid. I told him I didn't regret that it ended. I said I was sorry it ended the way it did. Both of those things were true at the same time. My house is quiet in the evenings now. I reorganized the kitchen back to the way I had it. The spice rack is exactly where it belongs. I make salmon with lemon and dill whenever I want, and nobody comments on it being complicated. Last month, my parents came over for the first time since I'd had the place to myself, and my dad walked through the room slowly, hands in his pockets, the way he does when he's taking something in. When he got back to the kitchen, he looked at me and nodded, like something had been confirmed for him. "You look like yourself again," he said. I didn't know how much I'd needed to hear that until I did. I think about what I would tell someone standing where I was standing 18 months ago. Someone who loves their partner and wants to believe it's enough. Someone who is absorbing things quietly and telling herself it's fine, it's temporary, it'll even out eventually. I would tell her that being generous isn't the same as being invisible. That naming something unfair isn't the same as being selfish. That when someone shows you, they will not see you until you force them to. Believe them the first time. I also think about the moment my husband said maybe we should consider an annulment, and how he expected that to land as a threat. How he expected me to crumble. I didn't crumble. I said okay. And that okay changed everything.